It was a perfect afternoon in Maplewood Park. The sun cast a warm glow over families picnicking on checkered blankets. Children giggling as they played tag, and dogs chasing after brightly colored frisbees. The air was filled with the sounds of summer, laughter, birds chirping, and the occasional bark. On a quiet bench beneath an old oak tree, a man sat, seemingly oblivious to the liveliness around him. Jonas Mitchell, a man in his late 40s with a calm demeanor, was enjoying his day off. His attire was simple: jeans, a flannel shirt, and a bright red hat that bore the words, "Make America Great Again." It wasn't the first time Jonas had worn the hat in public, but he was well aware of the mixed reactions it could provoke. For Jonas, the hat wasn't about controversy, it represented his personal beliefs. Nothing more. As Jonas turned the page of the book in his hands, he was unaware of the gaze fixed on him from across the park. Standing near a fountain, a woman named Linda Parker was frowning in his direction. Linda, a self-proclaimed advocate for inclusivity and harmony, felt a surge of irritation at the sight of Jonas's hat. To her, it was more than just a piece of fabric, it was a symbol of division and intolerance. It didn't belong in her beloved park, a place she considered a haven of peace. Linda was in her early 50s and carried herself with an air of confidence. Her small terrier, Max, tugged at his leash, eager to explore, but Linda's attention was elsewhere. She muttered under her breath, her irritation growing as Jonas's hat seemed to gleam in the sunlight. In her mind, it was a provocation, a challenge to the values she held dear. Unable to ignore it any longer, Linda decided to take action. She marched toward Jonas, her steps brisk and her expression stern. The closer she got, the more she rehearsed what she would say, determined to stand up for what she believed was right. "Excuse me." Linda's voice sliced through the gentle hum of the park. Jonas looked up, surprised by the sharpness in her tone. His brown eyes met hers briefly before he closed his book, placing it carefully beside him. "Yes," he replied evenly, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with Linda's agitation. Linda folded her arms tightly across her chest. "That hat," she began, her voice laced with disdain. "It's offensive. People like you have no business wearing something like that in a place like this." Jonas raised an eyebrow, taken aback but not surprised. He'd encountered similar reactions before. "I'm just sitting here, reading my book," he said, his tone measured. "I'm not bothering anyone." But Linda wasn't satisfied with his response. She took his calmness as indifference, even mockery. "You might not think you're bothering anyone," she shot back, her voice growing louder, "but that hat represents hate. It's making people uncomfortable." Jonas sighed, sensing the tension rising around them. Nearby, park goers began to take notice. Some stopped to watch, curious about the unfolding confrontation, while others muttered to themselves or shook their heads. "I'm not here to start trouble, ma'am," Jonas said. "I'm just enjoying the day, like everyone else." His polite response only fueled Linda's frustration. To her, it felt dismissive, as though he didn't take her concerns seriously. Her voice rose further, drawing more attention from the crowd. "You think you can just walk around flaunting that thing without consequences?" she demanded, pointing at the hat. "Well, not here, not in my community." Jonas remained seated, his calmness unshaken. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he replied, "but I have every right to be here. Just like you do." Linda's face flushed with anger. She couldn't understand why Jonas refused to engage in the argument she was practically begging him to have. Feeling the weight of the onlookers' stares and determined not to back down, she pulled out her phone. "If you won't leave," she declared, her voice shaking slightly, "then I'll make sure someone else makes you." Jonas tilted his head, a faint sigh escaping his lips. "Do what you think is necessary," he said quietly. Linda's fingers trembled as she dialed 911, more from adrenaline than fear. She turned away from Jonas as the call connected, her voice urgent. "Yes, I'm at Maplewood Park, and there's a man here causing a disturbance. He's being aggressive and wearing one of those hats. It's making people very uncomfortable." She glanced back at Jonas, who hadn't moved from his seat. He leaned back against the bench, seemingly resigned. Around them, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Some parkgoers backed away, while others raised their phones, capturing the scene on video. When Linda ended the call, she turned to Jonas with a triumphant look. "The police are on their way," she announced. Maybe they can explain why you don't belong here. Jonas simply nodded. I'll wait, he said. The tension in the park was palpable as everyone waited for the police to arrive. Some whispered among themselves, speculating about what had happened, while others stood silently, their eyes darting between Linda and Jonas. The once cheerful atmosphere had been replaced by unease. When the sound of sirens broke through the chatter, the crowd parted to make way for a patrol car. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the scene before approaching Linda and Jonas. Ma'am, we received a call about a disturbance, one officer said, his tone professional. Can you tell us what's going on? Linda wasted no time recounting her version of events. She gestured animatedly toward Jonas, her voice filled with conviction. That man, she said, is wearing a symbol of hate and making everyone here uncomfortable. He's being provocative and aggressive. The officers turned to Jonas, who remained seated, his hands resting on his lap. Sir, the second officer asked, her tone neutral. What's your side of the story? Jonas met her gaze, his voice calm. I'm just sitting here, reading my book, he said. This lady approached me and told me I needed to leave. I haven't said or done anything threatening. The first officer looked around at the gathered crowd, his eyes scanning for witnesses. Has anyone here seen this man act aggressively? He asked. Several people shook their heads. One woman stepped forward, her phone still in hand. I've been recording the whole thing, she said. He hasn't done anything. She's the one who started yelling. Linda's face flushed as murmurs rippled through the crowd. The officers exchanged glances, their skepticism growing. Ma'am, the second officer said, turning to Linda, wearing a hat, even one that might be considered controversial, isn't a crime. Unless this man has made specific threats or broken any laws, there's nothing we can do. Linda's expression shifted from indignation to disbelief. But that hat, she began, only to be cut off by the first officer. Ma'am, he said firmly, everyone here has the right to express themselves, as long as they're not violating any laws. The crowd murmured in agreement, and Linda's confidence began to falter. She opened her mouth to argue, but the sight of the officers turning back to Jonas stopped her. The second officer addressed him, her tone shifting to one of respect. Chief Mitchell, she said, is there anything you'd like us to do? A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Linda froze, her eyes wide with shock. Chief, she echoed, her voice barely audible. Jonas stood slowly, brushing off his pants. He gave the officers a small nod. Thank you for handling this professionally, he said. Then, turning to Linda, he added, I hope this serves as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. The story of Linda's encounter with Chief Jonas Mitchell spread quickly, capturing the attention of social media and local news outlets. Videos of the incident went viral, drawing both criticism and reflection. For Linda, the backlash was immediate and overwhelming. The following days were a blur of humiliation and introspection for Linda. She realized the gravity of her actions and the assumptions she had made. Determined to make amends, she reached out to Chief Mitchell, requesting a meeting to apologize. To her surprise, Jonas agreed. Their conversation, though difficult, was transformative. Jonas's calm demeanor and willingness to forgive left a lasting impact on Linda, who vowed to learn from the experience. In the weeks that followed, Linda immersed herself in community work and education, determined to grow from the incident. Meanwhile, Jonas used the event as a teachable moment, emphasizing the importance of empathy and understanding. Both walked away from the encounter changed, proving that even the most heated confrontations could lead to growth and redemption. Before you go, let's take a moment to reflect. Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to realize later that you were wrong? Stories like these remind us that growth begins with self-awareness and humility. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Motivation Wow for more heartfelt tales that inspire change and kindness in our world. See you in the next story.